Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Kevin Hancock. I'll be your host for today's webinar. I'm going to give 2 minutes for people who might be a little late joining up, so just please sit tight. If you'd like something to do while we're waiting, you will see a link to a Policy Pro free trial in the description section. That's what we're going to be discussing today, and we're going to actually be doing a live demonstration of that. If you'd like to follow along as we go through that, please feel free to click that link and sign up for your free trial. Welcome to those who are just joining us. As I had mentioned just a minute ago, I'm going to give people 2 minutes to join up before I go ahead and start the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and start in 1 more minute. If you'd like something to do while you're waiting and you don't have your free trial of Policy Pro started, you can use the link that's there in the description to sign up for that free trial. That is the software application we'll be covering today, and we'll be doing a live demonstration. If you'd like to follow along with us while we do that, feel free to go ahead and sign up for your free trial. All right, everybody. Well, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. Thanks for joining today's workshop. NIST 800-171 and CMMC compliance. Policies are the first step. Oops, sorry. During today's session, we will be demonstrating the use of Exostar's Policy Pro. Policy Pro does include a free trial. If you'd like to sign up for that free trial before we get started today, it'll take about 2 minutes. Please see the link in the YouTube description. That'll take you to the sign up page, and you can follow along while we go through the demonstration. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last about 45 minutes to an hour. That does include a question and answer session. That question and answer session will be dedicated to the questions that were submitted when you signed up for today's session. I've actually pulled those out, and I've got them on the last couple slides in the deck here. So I will be covering those at the end of today's session. If we do have an outage for any reason, just wait for a minute, refresh the page, and that should start everything back up for you. For your convenience, there is a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms, acronyms, and initializations, which will be referenced during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available on demand via the Exostar Resource Library. That can be found on our website at www.exostar.com/resources anytime after today, as well as the same YouTube link you received in your email. That'll also direct a replay of today's session. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, request a copy of this slide deck, please email us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. You can also reach us from our website, www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature on any of the pages on the website, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So as I mentioned, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and I'm joined by David Rowe. David, you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is David Rowe. I am the Business Development Manager here at ISMS, and happy to be here and show you a demo of the platform.
Thanks, David. So before I turn it over to David to walk you through Policy Pro itself, I just want to level set everybody on kind of where we are in the CMMC journey, and give you kind of that current state. So we're currently awaiting CMMC 2.0 rule to be sent over from the Department of Defense to the Office of Management and Budget. When that takes place, it will then come out of the OMB in a couple different states. And that's caused some confusion, and I'll get to that in just a minute, about when it will actually take effect. But what things that are going on in the background, there has been a joint surveillance voluntary program started. This is through the Department of Defense's DIBCAC organization. If you want to, you can go to the DIBCAC and ask for an assessor to come out and do that assessment of how you're doing against the current NIST 800-171 standards. This was started last August of 2022 and is an ongoing program. If you want to get information about the CMMC program, if you want to find out who those different organizations are that can either assist you or who might be preparing to be one of those third-party assessment organizations, you can go to the cyberab.org. That's their website there. That's the accreditation body for CMMC. They have a list of all the managed service providers who are going through the training or who have received all the training to become provider organizations or those C3PA or O organizations. Sorry about that, it's a tongue twister. Also, the latest rule that's come down from DFARS, which is the Defense Department's Federal Acquisition Regulations, is 252.204-7024. This basically allows DoD contracting officers to use the SPURS system and to use that as an evaluation of contracts that are out to bid on the overall risk that a particular vendor may have. So to kind of clarify that remark I made earlier about some CMMC confusion, as I mentioned before, currently the CMMC rules themselves are still in the DoD being finalized. They'll then be sent over to the Office of Management and Budget. And when they get over there, they're going to be marked with a particular designation. And this is really where kind of the confusion of the date of CMMC when it's officially put into effect is taking place. If it's marked as an interim final rule, we would expect there to be a 60-day period where it's in that interim state, and then about 60 days later, you'll see it start to appear in DoD contracts. Last year, probably about this time, we were under the impression that the rule would be sent over in March, and that you might start to see it to appear in contracts as early as May of 2023. Clearly, that's not happening because it's already May of 2023 and it hasn't left DoD yet. And there's also some question of how it's going to be marked once it gets over to the OMB. Will it come out as an interim final rule? Most people are now expecting it to come out as a notice of proposed rulemaking. This then introduces it into a period of public comment, and then the rules makers in the Department of Defense will then respond to those public comments, address them, etc., and then it would go kind of into that interim final rule. So that's kind of why we're kind of in this confused, well, not necessarily confused state, but we still don't really have a clear idea of when you'll see CMMC in full effect. Now, this does correspond with the early dates that were put out about CMMC way back in 2021. even then, when they talked about it, they expected it to be starting to take effect in 2024 and then be full in effect in 2025. And that's kind of the timeline we're tracking to currently. So just wanted to let everybody kind of know where we're at in that space. Now, I did mention that the latest DFARS clause that has been put out there is the DFARS 252.204-7024. As I mentioned before, this directs contracting officers to consider the supplier risk when they evaluate the overall bids for Department of Defense contracts. Those supplier performance risk system, that's that SPRS system that you enter in your score into, and that becomes one of the factors that determines the supplier risk. And that, and as I mentioned, now DoD contractors are expected to consider that in the overall bid for goods and services to the Department of Defense. So just keep that in mind. So if you're wondering what you have to do today, and this is another reason I kind of bring up that SPRS system, because that is integral to what you need to do today to meet these particular needs. Right? So please make sure you understand the contracts that you've signed and the clauses in which that are in them. If they have DFARS clauses 7012, 7019, 7020, and particularly the 7019 clause, then you fall under, if you will, the category of needing to comply with NIST 800-171. If you're doing, if in your contracts you have clause 7012, that was what said, hey, if you have controlled unclassified information, it needs to be maintained in such a way that you're compliant with 800-171. 7019 then guides you through doing a self-assessment that provides you a numerical score, which you then enter into the SPRS system. That's the current state, if you will, of where folks are today. So 7019 has you go through each of those 110 controls of NIST 800-171, say whether or not you've implemented them, put in place those policies that say, how you're going to do that. Put in the procedures that spell out, if you will, the different steps you take to implement those controls. Provide that proof that you've actually implemented them, and do that for each of those 110 controls. If you don't have those things, put in place a plan of action and milestone, a POAM, and then work toward closing that so you can implement, so you can say you've implemented that step. If you haven't implemented a particular step, you basically get a numerical score on that. You get, if you've implemented it, you get a 1, and your final score is 110. If you haven't implemented something, you get somewhere between a -1, a -3, or a -5, depending on the control itself. That score that you receive is what you then enter into the SPRS system. So that's where you need to be today in your overall, kind of current state. So if you're wondering about CMMC, right? So CMMC is also an implementation of the NIST 800-171 standard. What it says is if you receive federal contracts, you need to assure that you have some requirements in place for the protection of controlled unclassified information. Or if you're just a level 1, right, where you're just receiving federal contract information, you still have to be compliant with 17 practices, do an annual self-assessment of how you're doing against those practices, adjust if needed, etc. And then do a self-attestation that you've done that. If you actually receive controlled unclassified information as part of your as part of your contract, and you need to protect that. Then you're at level 2, and you need to satisfy those 110 controls of NIST 800-171. And then if you're at level 3, where you have critical controlled unclassified information, right? You're held to a higher standard. And DIBCAC itself comes and does a high assessment. Now, if you're wondering which of these different levels you're going to be held to, if you will, for when CMMC takes effect, really the key to look at is kind of where you are today. Which contract clauses do you have in place that you're satisfying today? And that'll kind of indicate where you need to be when CMMC does take effect. So one of the questions we got asked was, well, what do I need to do today? If I've done my self-assessment to NIST 800-171, I've got my SPURS score, it's entered, then what you now need to do is, close off any open POAMs you might have because you haven't implemented all 110 controls, and just monitor things and make sure you're continuing on that process, because if you read the 110 controls, there are periodic assessments you need to do. There's periodic training you need to do for your organization. There are periodic reviews of the different controls and things like that. So just make sure you're maintaining and you're doing that good hygiene across your security processes. So what really starts this journey and getting, if you will, your controls in place are those policies themselves, right? And that's really what we're here to talk about for the rest of today's session. It's how do I determine a good policy? If I'm struggling to figure out a particular policy for a particular control or a family, where might I start? Where do I get information, etc.? And that's really what Policy Pro brings to the table for you. It provides you those policy templates for the NIST 800-171. Correspondingly, since CMMC 2.0 implements 800-171, what you do today to get those policies in place will only help you when you go for CMMC 2.0. You want to edit those policies. You want to put them through Policy Pro and score them and figure out if you need to adjust, make changes, etc. Make sure you're reviewing your policies periodically, making sure, if these are ones you wrote a few years ago, making sure those are kept up to date, etc. And you want to do this in a cloud-based solution like Policy Pro, because then, this will be maintained as we see different revisions, changes, etc. So to show you how this works and how its overall effectiveness, I'm going to turn you over to David, and he's going to walk you through that. So David, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so what you'll be seeing today is the platform Policy Pro, and like Kevin said, it is a great place to get started, whether your organization is kind of just getting started with your cybersecurity program and your IT program and trying to figure out exactly how your organization can meet the requirements for NIST 800-171 as well as for CMMC 2.0. Or possibly your organization might be further along in the process and you've already kind of completed your policies. In either case or anywhere in between, I believe the platform can be a useful tool for you. So we'll walk through kind of the different features and some of the benefits of using a tool like this to help you with your policies and your procedures as well. So to get started, we'll start off using the policy building part, and this has been updated for CMMC 2.0. So if you're a little bit unfamiliar with CMMC 2.0 and everything is somewhat new to you, What it is the different levels, level 1, level 2, which we have on the platform, are connected directly to the NIST 800-171 policies, as well as all 110 practices for the NIST 800-171 revision 2. And so here on the left-hand side, you can see the 14 policy families, starting from access control all the way down to system and information integrity. So really, the platform can take you kind of step by step and help you easily figure out exactly what you need to do in terms of your policies. The first time through on the platform, you'll receive this pop-up here, and it's a brief explanation of some of those other documents that Kevin had mentioned that your organization either should have already, but if you don't, we do provide templates to both the POAM as well as the SSP. There's also an automated approach as well with the companion product called Certification Assistant, but that will be covered a little bit after the demo through Kevin. Again, today we'll focus primarily on the demo for policies and procedures. All right, so once you've kind of closed out that pop-up, you'll come here to the Prepare, Gather, and Consult page. This is everything you'll need, kind of the first step into your journey of creating your policies is to prepare everything necessary in order to make it as smooth as possible as you're writing those policies. So, for example, it might include things like gathering your organization's documents, records, processes, or procedures related to these various access control topics. For example, it might include things like your organization's maintenance of your IT infrastructure, personnel, training, all of those things will be utilized. In addition to that, you're going to want to consult with both internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. Some examples of that might be your organization's network administrator, head of IT, CISO, and then any sort of outside contractor if you do utilize one. So those can include your consultants, your MSPs, your MSSPs. They'll also be involved as part of this policy writing process. Once you have all of that, you'll then actually go on to the second step of the platform, which is to actually begin writing your policies. And you'll do that through our templates. And our templates are broken out into a couple different sections. We've got the header, which includes your organization name, the department it falls under, the issue date for when you finalize the policy, approved by, and the tracking number can be used to keep track of the version number of the policy. Then we move on to the other sections, including the purpose, the scope, and the most important and the bulk of where your work will be are the individual practices. So we break out each practice into its individual parts. So for example, here you can see access control 3.1.1, which is about limiting information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices. So it can be a little bit complex when you're reading that and you're unsure of what exactly that means. And so underneath each of the practices, we provide guidelines, and the guidelines will help you navigate and help you craft your policies. To open up the practice template, you'll click on the pencil icon here located to the right-hand side, and that will bring up the actual template pop-up for 3.1.1. And so we can see here we're going to be writing about our organization's account creation, as well as our work from home and bring your own device policy. A couple notes as you're working through on customizing and editing these policies is one, read the entirety of the section of the policy and the practice to make sure that it is reflective of what your organization has already implemented, or if you haven't yet implemented this particular practice, then what you plan on implementing based on what you write in your policy. So Keep that in mind as you're kind of writing your first draft here. Second piece to it is there's certain sections that should definitely be taken into consideration as you're customizing it. And so one example of that is going to be here in the first paragraph. All account creations will be submitted by the requesting department manager to the IT support email address for completion using the account request ticketing system or other process. So here, where it says account request ticketing system or other process, depending on, again, whatever it is your organization has implemented or plans to implement, that's what you would fill in there for whatever process or system you're using to create accounts. Another example of an area that should be customized is in the second bullet where it says systems administrators and members of the IT support team shall respond and act accordingly to requests within a timely fashion, offering at least a blank hour turnaround for account creation. So again, however many hours that takes usually for, or what your organization states it's going to be doing for account creation, that's what it would, that's what you would fill in that section there. Once you finish customizing and updating it to fit your organization, you'll save any changes made, and that will keep a timestamp as well as the user who made that change. So if you do have multiple users working on your policies together, you can keep track of which sections have already been changed and updated, and so it's a good way to keep track there. If you do want to change it back to the original template and original content there, you can click on the reset button, and that will only reset the individual practice. So any other changes made in previous or other practice sections will not be changed with that reset. Once you've done that, you're going to want to come here to the export button located on the bottom right. And that's going to do a couple things. It's going to combine those sections I mentioned before, so the header, the purpose, the scope, and the individual practices, and combine it into a single access control policy document, and it'll save it to your local hard drive so you can have a copy, as well as an important step for the second kind of part of the platform. Before moving on, though, for those who have already used Policy Pro for their policies before the update to CMMC 2.0. Your data resides here on the left-hand side where you see the legacy CMMC 1 data or the legacy NIST data. So depending on which version and which policies you've updated, your data will be included there. You can continue working on your policies in those sections, or you can migrate that information over to CMMC 2.0. Now, once we've kind of done that process of updating those policies and customizing it, we're going to want to come to the policy assessment piece. And again, we'll stick with our access control example here. So we'll go ahead and upload a policy together. And one note about the policies, and as I mentioned earlier on, regardless of where your organization is in terms of your cybersecurity journey and getting compliant around NIST and CMMC, is maybe you already have an existing access control document. You don't have to go into our policy builder and create a new policy. What you can do is upload your existing access control document as long as it fits two different criteria. One is that it is relevant to access control, and then number two is that it fits the accepted format. So doc, docx, and PDF files are acceptable here. So we'll go ahead and attach the access control policy, and we will immediately receive some different metrics and information about the policy I've just uploaded. To get a detailed view of it, we're going to click on the detailed scorecard here, and that'll bring up this pop-up. So for the policy I've uploaded, the overall assessment is that it appears relevant in size, scope, and organizational customization. The overall assessment is comprised of three different metrics. We've got the relevance, which is how many key terms or phrases are included in my document. The higher that number is, the higher the relevance, and therefore overall assessment is going to be. The model similarity is comparing the policy uploaded to our model documents and our template documents. And we do that for two reasons. One, again, it's important to appropriately customize it to fit your organization. So if it's too similar, you'll see that kind of too similar warning here in the model similarity. Also, we want to ensure that's covering everything it needs to cover. Finally, the word count is, while it doesn't directly impact the overall assessment or the other metrics, if it is too short, the chances of the assessment being accurate goes down. So you want to make sure that it just says that it's long enough so that we can appropriately assess your documents. The overall score for this policy was 70.5%. And it's not going to be like an academic score or what many people are kind of used to in terms of scoring. So 90% as an A, 80% as a B. What it is a threshold-based score. So meaning anything above a 50% is a relevant document. And I'll talk a little bit more about later on in the demo about how you can utilize the overall score as you're working on revising your policies. So those are kind of the broad-based metrics. What you're really probably interested in is what exactly am I missing in my policy and how can I improve my policies? And you can do that through our key elements not included, or KENNY for short. And we break that out into the control KENNYs and the general KENNYs. The control KENNYs here are those key terms and phrases I mentioned before. For example, CUI, non-public information, that is my key term I'm missing in my policy. And you can see here we provide some additional information. And so that key term is tied to a particular control or practice in CMMC. In this case, tied to access control 3.1.22, controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. So underneath that, we can see the discussion, and this discussion comes directly from CMMC, so you don't have to flip back and forth between the standard and trying to figure out the control. You can look directly here in the discussion to understand exactly how CUI non-public information fits into the standard itself. The documents for examination are going to be any other sort of document, record, or maybe audit logs in order to help you address that control KENNY. So it could include things like a security plan, list of users authorized to post publicly accessible content. Again, any other sort of documents that can help you address it within your policy. Certain control KENNYs, for example, here, FIPS, are going to be tied to multiple controls. So this one is tied to access control 3.1.13 as well as 3.1.17. So in the case of FIPS, where it's tied to at least two controls like this, you're going to want to address it in each control that it's referenced under. Now, we also have the general policy KENNY terms, which again are those key terms and phrases I'm missing in my policy. However, you're not going to see this expand all, collapse all button with the additional information for these KENNYs. And the reason for that is these KENNYs are more generic towards the overall access control policy and is not tied to a specific control. So you're just going to want to make sure to include both the general KENNYs as well as the control KENNYs into your policies. Once you've done that, or as you're working on that, if you want to export into a PDF, maybe you prefer working offline or want to share it with others, you can export these results as well. One other feature I want to talk about before moving on is this management approval button. So we'll go ahead and click this button here, say it's been management approved, and we'll go into the dashboard. Now, the dashboard is going to show you all your work and your progress throughout the platform, whether you're creating policies in Policy Builder or working on assessing those policies and revising your policies. You can see all of those results here. And the management approval button also shows here. So we can see that the latest policy here in the green is going to be my most up-to-date policy. We can see who it was approved by as well as when. So it's a good way to keep internal track of your policies. As Kevin mentioned before, it's important to periodically review and update your policies. And as you do that, you want to ensure that everyone in the organization is following the most up-to-date policy. And you can use that for both internal purposes as well as external purposes to show that you have indeed followed your policies on updating your policies periodically. In addition to that, what you're going to want to do is, as you're working on reducing those control and general KENNYs based on the policy assessment, you'll see your overall score also trending upwards. So again, to kind of recap the overall score, is that as long as it's above a 50%, you have a relevant document, and as you're reducing the KENNYs and re-uploading your policies, you'll see those that overall score trending upwards. Now, all of that can be a bit daunting at times, and maybe certain things might be a bit confusing. And so you'll come here into our reference library and be able to get some further assistance and understanding of various topics. So maybe you're working on a policy in Policy Builder, or you've received a KENNY that you're unsure how to address based on the assessment. You can come to the appropriate section. So let's say one of my KENNYs was related to VPNs or maybe mobile devices. I can come and select the appropriate link and get some more additional context and information about how to address it within my policy. So again, all of that was done for the CMMC 2.0 Level 2 version. We do also have for Level 1 as well. So Level 1, if you swap over there, it's going to deal with the 6 different policies as well as the 17 practices. And you can freely swap back and forth depending on, again, where it is based on your contracts. And so once you've kind of finished that process for creating and assessing your policies, you'll then move on either towards closing those POAMs and making sure that everything has been updated for the other documents that you'll be required to have, including the SSP as well. So hopefully this has been a pretty simple and instructive demo in terms of how you can get started. I know it can be daunting for a lot of people, and so we really try to keep the platform as simple and easy to use. And so you can really see that the policies are all laid out in the templates, and we even provide the assessment portions in order to make sure that you're covering everything you need to cover. So that's it for the demo, and let me turn it back over to Kevin to finish off the webinar.
Thanks so much, David. Maybe. There we go. All right, everybody. So Policy Pro is part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. It includes not only Policy Pro, where you kind of get started, if you will, and get those policies written for those different controls, but it also includes Certification Assistant. Certification Assistant allows you to do a self-assessment against the 800/171 controls. It will generate that score that you need to enter into the SPR system. Its output is that score, the system security plan that generates that score, any open POAMs you might have to address open items, and then allows you to use that same platform to track your progress as you work toward, getting full compliance with those 800/171 controls. If during your journey you decide you need a a better way to store and process controlled unclassified information. You no longer want to keep it on site. You want to, move it, if you will, to a cloud service. Exostar offers its managed Microsoft 365 solution. This is a managed enclave up in GCC High, which provides you a Teams interface to store and process that controlled unclassified information that you may either receive or both receive and process as part of your fulfillment of a contract. This enclave is managed by Exostar's tech ops teams, supported by Exostar's support team, and integrates with your current environment. So you only have to give people access who need access to it, and allows you to gate off that information into this secure enclave. If you need some additional assistance, if you'd like to engage with a managed service provider or one of those C3PA or organizations as you get ready to do an assessment, or you've done your self-assessment, but you want someone to come and check to see how you're doing what's typically called a readiness assessment. Exostar also has a number of partners available through our website, or that we can work with you, both across this entire suite, but also obviously to help you fine-tune those things as well. So as we wrap up and I get to the questions that were asked prior to today's event, wanted to please ask people to fill out that exit poll that you see there in the link in the YouTube description. This will allow us to not only see how we did today, but also offer you a chance to let us know additional topics that you'd like to hear about, and lets us improve overall. Now let me get to those questions that were answered. So we did get the question about what exactly is controlled unclassified information. And to tell you the truth, I don't have a great answer to this. First, the thing to remember is that controlled unclassified information is marked by whoever creates it as controlled unclassified information. So you may receive something that's marked controlled unclassified information as part of your fulfillment of a contract. If you receive something that's marked CUI, you then develop something. Those technical specifications, documentation, tolerances, things like that that are derivative works of that may also be considered controlled unclassified information. But it really is on the creators to mark it as such. So there are training sessions on controlled unclassified information. These are often available from your different statewide MEPS organizations, Project Spectrum from the Department of Defense, et cetera. So I'd encourage you to go take a look at those to get a better handle on what is controlled unclassified information. I wish I could just point to you and say, this is it, this is the reference, but it's not quite as simple as that. So question 2, as a wholesaler of COTS products only, how is this requirement applicable to a distributor that is reselling to federal contractors and their subs? So remember, the NIST 800-171 is what deals with controlled unclassified information. But there is a level 1 of CMMC, right, with those 19 controls that you have to have in place, because you may have a requirement that you only that you have federal contract information, or FCI. Those are things you still have to do a self-assessment about to make sure that you do comply with those as well. Also, you may receive CUI as part of a contract. So it really behooves you to understand what contracts you signed, what clauses are in there, to ask your procurement agents that you're working with, if you are a sub to those federal contractors, to understand what you signed up for and what you've agreed to, and make sure you're fulfilling those requirements. I think I already answered 3, right? We already have a NIST 800-171 audit and score. And really, as I mentioned before, your best way to prepare for CMMC is to keep doing what you're doing. make sure you've got that plan in place to address any open POAMs you may have. Keep up to date on changes and continue to fulfill, those control requirements that you currently have in place. So question number 4, do cloud services like Microsoft Office 360, GovCloud, and a file sharing site, are those NIST 800-171 compliant? And again, this is going to be one of those where it depends. And the reason I say it depends is because part of it's going to be the service, part of it's going to be what that provider has signed up for and what they comply with. Typically, if you are consuming a cloud service, like, for example, Microsoft, and Microsoft has a ton of products, but you're looking for cloud services that are FedRAMP moderate equivalent. That's the terminology that most of these will use to say, and that means they meet the requirements to fulfill that allow their use in NIST 800-171 compliant environments, I should say. Because just using one of these services or one of these things doesn't make you NIST 800-171 compliant. All of these things typically come with what's called a shared responsibility matrix, or they take care of some of the controls when you're in that environment, but if you exit that environment, if you remove things from that environment, etc., then your internal controls then take over. So take into consideration the flow of controlled unclassified information, how it goes through your system, how do you receive it, how do you get it into these external applications or sharing platforms, etc. Who touches it? Who do you give access to those environments, etc.? All those come into that that NIST 800-171 compliance. Number 5. So with regards to policies for the CMMC Level 2 certification, is it better to have a single document for all security policies or a collection of individual policies? So typically, and David, correct me if I'm wrong here, typically you write the policy at the family level. And within that family, you address each of those different controls within the policy. So there are 14 control families, and there are 110 individual controls in NIST 800-171. So you'll typically write a policy for that control family. It'll address all those different controls within that policy. You'll score that in Policy Pro, and then you'll also have to provide that the procedures that you use to fulfill that policy, and then the proof that you've actually implemented those procedures. And then when the assessor comes on site, they may also interview people to make sure that your teams understand their role, what they're doing, how they're implementing, etc. So we got just a couple more questions. Before I do that, just wanted to let you know about Certification Assistant. So Certification Assistant is that application which allows you to kind of centralize all this information in one place. It allows you to take those policies that you've written in Policy Pro, maintain those along with those implementation statements, the artifacts about how you've actually done that implementation, those policies that you wrote as well, and keep those in one location. Allow you to easily have that place to show those assessors what you're doing, how you're doing, etc. The output of this is that SPRS score that you need to enter, any open POAMs you might have. It allows you to create those workflow tasks to keep these policies updated, allows you to create those workflow tasks to remind yourself to check logs and do all those things that are part of any good security policy. CA also has a free trial. You can sign up for that from Exostar's website as well. And then again, my final two questions. So should your policies call out each step taken to, or have a separate process document? And so this is where it comes into, so policies say what, if you will, what we're going to do, but you also need those procedures that say how you're doing that. So, your access policies, right? How you, if you will, your policy around providing access to all those who need access. How do you do that is then the procedures on how you actually implement those. Those are separate things, and they're typically should be separated. And then I've already talked about kind of the CMMC 2.0 timeline. We don't really know yet until it comes over from the DoD. We won't have an idea of what it's currently marked, etc. But just keep in mind that it is coming. Keep in mind that the timeline was originally that it start to be implemented in 2024 and that it be fully implemented by 2025. All of these things are wrapped around the NIST 800-171 requirement. Those are what you need to do today. So, so the continue to do what you're doing. Get that assessment of how you're doing against NIST 800-171. Get that SPOR score. Know your open POAMs. Work to close those, and keep up to date on any changes that are coming down the pipe. We'll continue to provide you information and these kinds of events throughout. Right, this is part of our monthly webinar series around CMMC and overall NIST 800-171 readiness. We have another event next week about certification assistant if you'd like to sign up for that. We also have a weekly general CMMC informational webinar. You'll receive information via email about that one. And then obviously there's a whole lot of information out there, including our free trials, if you'd like to try any of the things we talked about today. Please take a minute, just give us your feedback in the exit poll. We'd really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for their time and attention today. Hope you all have a great day, and we'll hopefully be talking to you soon. Thanks. And thanks, David.
Thank you.